Purple gonna kill me because the cord keep hitting the thing.
Sound check. Because, after last week's debacle with the sound, we're not going to have that issue again. So, 1, 2, my mic sounds nice. Check 1. What sounds good in my ears? I hope it sounds good in yours. Let's get into it. All right, let's get into it. What's up, Passionates? So, I was on break from work one day, and I was reflecting on the conversation I just had with my coworker. I thought back to when I was significantly younger, and I commonly heard, "That's just the way she is," from my peer group at school. Bear in mind that I went to a predominantly white school in Greenwich, in Connecticut, which was the polar opposite of the neighborhood in which I resided. The duality of that was enough to do a few episodes on, but not the focus of this particular episode. What made me think of it was hearing a similar commonly used phrase regarding someone from my job. They said, "We all know how this person is." Put a bookmark in that. Now, I'm a firm believer in giving people room as well as making room for people to be themselves. I also know how uncomfortable that can be in certain circumstances. For example, I knew someone who was unreasonably loud, especially when they got excited. Like their voice literally banged and clanged off of every surface and my eardrums. That's absolutely not what's up when you have nothing to absorb the sound. So while wanting to leave room for their excitement and for their joy, or even for them to express disdain, their expression literally made my ears ring. And there's just no nice way to say, "Beloved, I don't want to talk to you," because when you get too excited, I walk away feeling like I've been in the club all night. But that was exactly how I felt. So while being in this friendship was damaging to my hearing and literally physically uncomfortable, I wanted for them to feel comfortable being, because that actually was the way they were. So I tried to find a happy medium. Eventually, I found out that they couldn't hear themselves well, and so they overcompensated as though the rest of us were hard of hearing too. I've been around people who are reserved to the point of making others uncomfortable because nothing about their body language or their facial expression indicates that they are having a good time. They aren't interacting, and they look like they're just watching you in that awkward creep way. Now, if you ask them, they'll tell you they're having a great time. If you ask them repeatedly, you may even begin to make them uncomfortable because you're asking a question they've already answered. You can't drag them into your energy space or make them move the way you do when you demonstrate enjoyment or merriment. But in order for you to process their joy and excitement, you need it to look like yours. But that's just the way they are. And you have to leave room for that, or create the room for that, if you want them to be in attendance or if you want to continue to be invited. These instances are matters of acceptance. Acceptance, leaving room, making room, holding space for people. These are very important attributes of healthy and beneficial relationships. What's not healthy is when the line is crossed and acceptance becomes enabling. Going back to the earlier commentary of how this even came to mind, I had an encounter at work where leadership didn't want to deal with the calls that were coming in. Let me give you some context. There were closures throughout the community, and everyone was up in arms because they needed their things. They weren't going to be able to get them. It wasn't fair. They had no notice. They had to go to work that night. They needed uniforms. They were going out of town. They couldn't wait for the following day. All of their concerns that they voiced were valid. But none of them were valid enough to get these doors opened. And to be fair, there were no signs posted day of. That was consistent across the board. That was the shared sentiment from almost everyone who called. The counter from our side was that the notification was sent out the day before, and as such, whatever was in these locked away places was going to stay there because the doors were not going to be reopened. So caller calls and says, I'm leaving town tonight. I will not be in the state when the doors reopen. She's having a full-on meltdown. She's crying every few words. I advise her of what I've been told 2 or 3 times, and she's unraveling. So I say to myself, okay, being that she has an extenuating circumstance, let me just ask if they're willing to do something for her. Since the previous call had gone so poorly, when leadership looked at the phone, they assumed that the call was just patched through. So instead of answering and just saying no, they picked up and hung up, only they hung up on me. And I was vexed. But I said to myself, okay, maybe it was an error. So let me just go see. Let me ask. So when I asked, did you just hang up on me? I'm met with a very rude line of questioning and instructions on to whom those calls should be addressed going forward. Then there was the face and the neck choreography. Now, what I'm not going to do is entertain anything less than professionalism in a professional environment, and here's why. Because the minute you meet people where they are with their street mannerisms and you offend or upset them, they want to use terms like unprofessional and insubordinate. And I know they don't want the smoke, so I don't feel like they should be fanning the flame, so that's what we're going to not do. Point is, I return to my office. I'm feeling very annoyed by the whole encounter. I still have to return to this lady who is patiently, hopefully, and tearfully waiting for a response. I speak to her. I tell her what I need to tell her. I talk it over with my coworker. My other coworker, who was present for the exchange, comes into the office. They chime in from their perspective. They agree. The conversation was poorly handled. But, they say, we all know how this person is. There is a point where accepting people as they are becomes enabling. People are going to come with their quirks. They're going to come with their things that may not always mesh with us. And that's totally fine. At the point where we're accepting rudeness and brashness and incivility, we have crossed the line and we are creating monsters. Now, someone's saying, well, Passion, either we're accepting people or we're not. You can't accept people with an asterisk and say exceptions apply. And to that I say, yes, the hell you can. Someone who is hard of hearing, speaking loudly because they can't hear themselves, they need some acceptance. There's a need present. Someone who is rude and unseemly doesn't need acceptance. They need correction. And when we are the someones needing correction, I feel like we should just go ahead and cancel using this "that's just how I am" as a justification. Mannerlessness is never beyond overcoming. Rudeness is a choice. There is a difference between being rude and being direct. There is a difference between being rude and being emotionless. Example. Plenty of times I've been asked questions and given very direct answers with zero emotion. I had no emotional attachment to what was transpiring. I had information and I disseminated it. My job was done. Take your feelings out of the equation, and there was only information given per the request. I find so often that most people who behave so undesirably do so because it's been tolerated or because they have brute force and feel like violence will get things solved when they no longer feel like talking. And more times than not, that tolerance is offered because it's often easier to walk away and let them be awful than to be in battle with them. And I understand that thinking as well. I believe, I don't know if it was this part or the previous part, I've shared with you before the story about the coworker who was 100% dead wrong. And when I corrected them, They were so arrogant and disrespectful, I vowed then to never correct them again. Now, when it circled around and they were wrong in another instance and asked me why I didn't correct them, I told them outright, you were so nasty and disgusting the last time I tried to correct you, I decided to let you be wrong going forward. Now, yes, that was very petty. I'm unashamed. They learned a very important lesson that day. Y'all know I'm a proponent for picking, your battles and leaving people right where they are. However, if no one ever addresses the problem and the behavior, it will be ongoing forever. If these are people we have to interact with regularly, at some point, we'll encounter the issue again. We'll be bothered again, and we'll be complicit again. And the linear complaining so many of us love to do will be null and void again, because instead of confronting the issue and the person directly, we tolerated and by default endorsed the behavior. And as much as they're responsible in an ecosystem where we're all interconnected and all here in service to one another, although most of us act like we're not because we just don't want to be, as much as they're responsible, we're responsible as well. Now, I know you think I probably fell and bumped my head, but think it through. You can only do what you know to do. If you know no different, you can do no different. So if I know a behavior is problematic, but I don't know if the person exhibiting the behavior knows it's problematic, it's for me to say something, at least if we have a relationship. And while the moment of transgression may not be the best time to do the correction, that doesn't mean never do it. It means at some point, and sooner, better than later, make the effort to at least put a bug in their ear. Now, if you've made the effort to address it or bring it to their attention and they stand staunchly on not changing, you've still done a mitzvah and you set yourself up for future encounters. You're rude. It's uncalled for. I pull you to the side and point it out to you. You say, it gav. And tell me, anybody who don't like it, they could go fly a kite. Bet. Next time you come to me that way, the stage is already set. I have options. I can calmly remind you that this is unacceptable. I can light into you and set your soul on fire because I already told you it was a problem. Or I can completely disregard you. And when your injured ego wants to know why I'm acting like this, we can refer back to the corrective conversation. I told you it was a problem and that I would not entertain this behavior. Move along. And I'm sure somebody's still wondering, how is someone else being a wretch my responsibility? Besides the fact that, again, we're all responsible for each other. If no one says anything, that person can then say, I never knew it was a problem because no one ever told me. You're an enabler if you allow them to evade accountability. You're an enabler if you allow them to be the victim and the victimizer. There's enough of that in this world. We don't need any more. I'm reminded of this story that my mother had on the refrigerator. I still have it on my walls, called Whose Job Is It Anyway? This is a story about 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done. Everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. It's the same concept. Nobody wants to do it. Anybody could do it. Everybody's responsible because somebody should have done it. Going back to that's just the way I am, or I can't help the way I am. If the problem child that I've been talking about all this time is you, both of those statements are lazy cop-outs, so you don't have to do the work. You can change any and everything you want to. Missing limbs, you can get prosthetics.
Missing teeth, you can get dentures. Balding, you can take supplements. You can get plugs, wear wigs, wear weaves, spray some hair on. Like, unless the issue is blindness or deafness or death. And even within those, there are still levels of changeability or correctability. You can change anything you want to. The truth is, you don't want to. And we don't want to put up with your nonsense. And while you use our disdain as the qualifier for the chip on your shoulder, it is not now, nor has it ever been, that we aren't accepting you for who you are, at least not for me. I'm not accepting mediocrity. I definitely said that in the previous pod. You are more than your lazy ways. Do the work. And I say that as someone who is still doing the work. I'm still chastising me. I'm still self-examining. I'm still rebuking myself. I had to make some adjustments in my own disposition. My energy is loud. I once was told by somebody I had just met that they'd seen me coming from around the corner because my aura is that big. People used to always tell me that my mood determines the mood of the room, and I couldn't bend my mind around this concept because it was just something I'd never experienced up until recently. Another story, another time. So I felt like, how can my mood affect the whole room? And if it does, then the issue is the people in the room, because no one should have that much control over anyone else. Learning and better understanding energy and how it works, it now makes sense. I once was the person that said, I can't help this and I can't change that. But I also wasn't looking for ways to change any of it because I wasn't on the receiving end of it. So I didn't really know the impact of it. And because I was just trying to be, I wasn't trying to be better. In order for a piece to recognize itself as a fragment, it first has to know that it's part of the whole. Until the fragment knows it's part of the whole, it will always feel whole until it becomes broken into even smaller pieces. That'll preach. Y'all can put your hands together right there, okay? I was not thinking about the whole at that time. I was thinking about my fragment. Coming into an understanding of my connection to the rest of the puzzle enables me to talk about this and help you help your circle and help yourself. And for those of you who have loud or dominant energy that can shift everyone else's mood, while you may not be able to control the intensity of your energy, you can absolutely choose to be careful with it. You can absolutely choose to be intentional with it. And if you choose to move with reckless abandon, only remember that the tide will turn, and when it does, and you're on the receiving end of that same energy, if you choose to play the victim, know that you are only the victim of your own doing. You're welcome. When I was a child, and they said, that's just the way she is, the reference was more to cultural differences and personality traits like reservation in some areas and outspokenness in other areas. It wasn't in reference to toxicity and toxic behavior. If just the way you are is rude, obnoxious, and constantly rubbing people wrong, and you're of the mind that people who don't accept it can't handle it, let's just take a moment and clarify that some people don't think you're worth the jail sentence that they would receive for knocking your block off your shoulders. And no one wants to be subjected to treatment that they don't deserve, period. There's a difference between can't handle and don't want to deal with. But for those of us who don't want to deal with the fallout, so we don't address the issue, by not addressing it, we allow it to grow and fester, waiting to do something about something when you're at the point of saying, this is out of control, is waiting too long. Not ever saying anything is as bad as endorsing it. And the impact is not local, it's global. I'm going to leave you with one quick other point, and then we're just going to close this out. While part of the enabling is acting like the behavior is not a problem when it's happening, another significant part of the problem is acting like nothing happened when they've returned to conduct more becoming. It's like giving someone permission to abuse you because they have no real self-understanding or control, and then being grateful if they apologize because they knew they were wrong in the first place. Or giving them the free pass to abuse you again because of whatever demons they're battling the next time. And that includes the ones living on plausible deniability. Saying they never knew it was a problem and them actually being unaware that it was a problem is very different. You cannot continually give people permission to abuse you and then blame them for being abusive. Passionates, I feel like we covered some good ground. I feel like I've said everything that I need to say, that I want to say, and that I'm going to say. At this point, you should go forth. Be filled with bliss. Be armed and empowered with knowledge. Remember to be accepting, but don't be enabling. In all things, be passionate. Later.